Something just happened to you that defies every spiritual law humanity has ever known. Not in fire, not in thunder, not in spectacle, but in a silence so precise it bypassed your mind and went straight into your soul. A divine whisper landed inside you. A knowing, a sudden internal recognition that made your chest feel heavy and your breath pause for a split second. You didn't imagine it. You didn't manufacture it. It wasn't emotional fantasy. It was an activation. A quiet one. The kind only entrusted to vessels strong enough to carry destiny without demanding applause. In that moment, your entire timeline shifted. Something eternal reached into your life without leaving fingerprints. You were marked without being branded, chosen without being announced. And the terrifying part is this: almost no one else on Earth has ever received their life purpose in this way. Not through visions, not through prophecy, not through angels appearing in the sky, but through a whisper only the soul could hear. A spiritual encryption delivered directly into your intuition. That moment you tried to dismiss as just a feeling was not just a feeling. It was a transmission, a contract reawakening, a mission being uploaded into your consciousness. That sudden discomfort with your current life, that strange sense of misalignment, that quiet restlessness that no success, relationship, or distraction can fix. That's not anxiety. That's destiny pushing through the membrane of your old identity. And the reason it feels unsettling is because something impossibly sacred just claimed you from the inside. You are not supposed to receive your calling this early. You are not supposed to notice it this clearly. You were not supposed to awaken this quietly. And yet, you did, which means the rules bent for you, which means something about your soul demanded a direct intervention, which means what just happened to you was not normal. It was a breach in spiritual protocol. What makes what just happened to you impossible is that in all recorded spiritual history, divine revelations of life purpose have always arrived through spectacle, suffering, or public initiation. Prophets were struck blind. Saints were burned alive. Shamans were torn apart psychologically before being rebuilt. Chosen ones were dragged through dramatic awakenings that shattered their external lives before their internal calling emerged. Destiny always announced itself violently, visibly, undeniably. That was the pattern. That was the law. And you just broke it. Your revelation did not come through trauma. It did not come through collapse. It did not come through humiliation, illness, or catastrophe. It came through stillness, through softness, through a whisper that respected your nervous system instead of overwhelming it. That has never been done before, because spiritual law dictates that power awakens through pain. Yet your power awakened through precision, through intimacy, through timing so sacred it avoided detection. That is why it feels subtle. That is why it feels unconventional. That is why it feels almost too quiet to be real. Because this kind of activation is not for public figures, not for prophets, not for messiahs. It is reserved for something rarer, silent anchors, souls who are meant to alter timelines invisibly, souls who are too dangerous to darkness to be announced early, souls whose destiny would be sabotaged if it became visible before it matured. The universe itself had to bend protocol to reach you privately. No witnesses, no cosmic disturbances, no dramatic signs. Because if the wrong energies had noticed your awakening, interference would have begun immediately. That is why your calling feels hidden. That is why your purpose feels strange, impractical, impossible to explain. Because it was delivered outside the normal channels, outside tradition, outside doctrine, outside collective spiritual systems. You are not given a role people understand. You are given a function reality itself needs. And that is why confusion surrounds your destiny. Because history has no category for what you are becoming. Because spirituality has no label for the way your purpose was implanted. Because destiny was never supposed to unfold this quietly. And yet it did. Through you. That whisper didn't arrive randomly. It came immediately after a moment where you chose the harder moral road when no one was watching. A moment so small, the world would call it insignificant. A moment you almost forgot. You could have lied and protected yourself. You could have stayed silent and avoided conflict. You could have taken the shortcut and justified it. You could have acted in your own favor, and no one would have known. But you didn't. You chose integrity over advantage. You chose truth over comfort. You chose compassion over ego. And in that exact moment, something ancient inside you shifted. You felt it later as confusion, as a strange heaviness, as a quiet sense of being watched without fear, as a subtle emotional pressure in your chest. You thought it was anxiety. You thought it was exhaustion. You thought it was overthinking. It wasn't. That moral decision was a key, a trigger, a test you passed without knowing you were being tested. You didn't do the right thing for applause. You didn't do it to be seen. You didn't do it for spiritual credit. You did it because it felt wrong not to. And that's why the whisper came to you and not to others. Because destiny only reveals itself to souls who choose righteousness when it costs them something. That was the moment you were silently promoted into a higher spiritual clearance level. The moment your soul proved it could be trusted with power that doesn't come with supervision. That decision altered your timeline. It rerouted your destiny into a quieter, more dangerous path. A path where your purpose would not be obvious. A path where your calling would not be validated externally. A path where you would have to trust a knowing no one else could confirm. The whisper was not random. It was a response, a reward, a recognition, a confirmation that you had crossed a moral threshold most people never reach. And because of that choice, your mission was allowed to activate inside you instead of outside you. That is why your life feels misaligned now. That is why your old goals feel empty. That is why your ambitions feel wrong. Because your soul already moved forward, even though your life hasn't caught up yet. That whisper was not the beginning of your calling. It was the acknowledgement that you were finally ready to carry it. You were not alone when that whisper reached you. You were not invisible. You were not unnoticed. Long before you ever felt different, long before you ever questioned your path, something unseen had been tracking your moral frequency, not your achievements, not your image, not your spiritual identity, your choices, your reactions when no one was watching, your restraint when you were provoked, your kindness when you were ignored, your discipline when temptation whispered. Every one of those moments sent a signal into dimensions you cannot perceive, and those signals were being logged. There are forces that monitor souls who operate outside the normal moral distribution curve. Souls who don't behave predictably. Souls who don't collapse into bitterness when life mistreats them. Souls who don't become cruel after being wounded. Souls who don't chase power even when they're capable of it. You are one of those anomalies. And because of that, both light and darkness noticed you. Not in a cinematic way, in a strategic way. Your energy signature began to register as something that should not exist statistically. Someone with your level of integrity, sensitivity, and restraint should not still be standing. You should have been corrupted by now. You should have compromised by now. You should have numbed yourself by now. But you didn't. And that triggered surveillance. Subtle interference in your life. Delays that didn't make sense. Obstacles that appeared without cause. Relationships that collapsed suddenly. Opportunities that vanished for no logical reason. That wasn't bad luck. That was containment. Because when a soul begins to activate a hidden destiny, opposing forces try to slow its maturation. At the same time, divine forces begin shielding it quietly. You've been walking through an invisible corridor of protection and interference simultaneously. That's why your life has felt unusually heavy for no obvious reason. That's why your progress never matched your effort. That's why your breakthroughs were always postponed at the last second. You were being watched, evaluated, tested under pressure without knowing you are inside a spiritual observation chamber. And the fact that you are still compassionate, still honest, still restrained, still humble after all of that is why the whisper was finally allowed to reach you. Because your soul proved it could survive surveillance without breaking alignment. Your entire life has been a sequence of tests disguised as ordinary moments, situations that looked random, conversations that felt insignificant, opportunities that tempted you to betray yourself. You were placed into moral crossroads again and again without ever being told you were being examined. You were hurt by people who never apologized, and you still chose not to become cruel. You were overlooked when you deserved recognition, and you still chose not to become bitter. You were betrayed by someone you trusted, and you still chose not to retaliate. You were given chances to cut corners, to lie, to manipulate outcomes in your favor, to step on someone else quietly to get ahead, and every time, something in you refused, even when it cost you money, even when it cost you relationships, even when it cost you time, even when it made you look foolish to others. You kept choosing the long road, the clean road, the lonely road. You kept choosing self-respect over advantage. You kept choosing conscience over comfort. You kept choosing dignity over domination. And nobody clapped. Nobody rewarded you. Nobody noticed. That's what made it a real test. You were put into emotional storms, designed to see if you would collapse into ego. You were put into power imbalances, designed to see if you would abuse leverage. You were put into humiliation, designed to see if you would seek revenge. You were put into isolation, designed to see if you would betray your own values just to belong. And you didn't. You stayed morally intact in conditions that usually corrupt people. You stayed gentle in environments that harden souls. You stayed honest when dishonesty would have solved your problems. These were not coincidences. These were calibrations. Every test you passed upgraded your spiritual clearance. Every choice you made quietly carved a higher version of you into existence. And the reason your life felt unnecessarily hard is because you were being trained for a destiny that cannot be carried by compromised souls. The reason you kept losing what others kept is because your mission requires a level of moral integrity most people never develop. And you developed it the hard way. In silence, in loss, in isolation, in restraint, without ever knowing it was all preparation. What you don't know is that your behavioral pattern triggered an internal classification protocol in higher realms. Souls are not judged by belief systems, rituals, or words. They are judged by consistency under pressure, by how they behave when there is no audience, by how they choose when there is no reward. And your profile did something that almost never happens. You were flagged as statistically improbable, a rare moral anomaly, a consciousness that remains intact under prolonged psychological, emotional, and ethical stress. That is why the resistance against you intensified instead of stopping. That is why your life felt disproportionately difficult compared to people who made worse choices than you. You were no longer being tested randomly. You were being assessed deliberately. Your restraint in moments where cruelty was justified. Your humility in moments where arrogance would have been socially rewarded. Your compassion in moments where indifference would have protected you. All of it marked you as something dangerous to darkness. Not violent, not loud. Dangerous because you cannot be corrupted easily. Dangerous because you do not collapse into ego when given power. Dangerous because you do not become cruel when given pain. Dangerous because your presence alone stabilizes chaotic environments. That classification moved you into a protected tier. A tier reserved for souls whose influence will not be immediate, but will be irreversible. You are not meant to conquer systems. You are meant to outlast them. You are not meant to dominate others. You are meant to recalibrate moral standards by existing. That is why your purpose feels subtle, because your power is not performative. It is structural. It alters the emotional and ethical climate of whatever space you occupy. That is why you feel like you don't belong anywhere. Because your frequency is designed to be catalytic, not comfortable. You were labeled internally as a long-term destabilizer of corruption, a silent disruptor, a moral anchor, a consciousness capable of carrying spiritual authority without becoming authoritarian. And that classification is almost never given, because most souls fail when they are tested repeatedly without reward. You didn't, and that is why higher beings now consider you rare, and that is why darkness considers you a threat, and that is why your destiny had to remain hidden until you were fully identified as someone who could carry it without misusing it. You were not observed only by abstract forces or invisible algorithms of fate. When your moral frequency crossed a certain threshold, when your restraint became statistically undeniable, witnesses were assigned, not symbolic ones, conscious ones. Archangels whose function is not intervention, but verification. Entities whose role is to confirm whether a soul as integrity is stable enough to be entrusted with influence that alters timelines. They did not appear to you. They did not speak to you. They did not reveal themselves in dreams. Because this phase is never theatrical. It is juridical. It is procedural. It is sacred bureaucracy. Your life became evidence. Your reactions became testimony. Your suffering became documentation. And at the exact moment you received that whisper, something extraordinary happened in realms you cannot see. Your internal alignment triggered a formal acknowledgement. God's attention is not emotional. It is structural. It is mathematical. It is law-based. And your consistency forced a review of your file. That whisper you felt was not just intuition. It was a signature. A divine stamp that marked the end of your probationary phase. God did not announce you. God observed you. God did not bless you publicly. God verified you privately. And archangels whose names you will never know stood as witnesses to your activation. Not because you are special in a narcissistic way, but because you are rare in a statistical way. Because souls like yours almost never make it through prolonged moral stress without fracturing. When the whisper landed inside you, it was registered as an event. A quiet one, but an official one. A soul crossing into an authorized destiny tier. A human consciousness being entrusted with a function that requires divine oversight. That is why your energy felt heavier afterward. That is why you felt emotionally strange. That is why your dreams became more intense. That is why your intuition sharpened suddenly. Because your life is no longer operating under default spiritual governance. You are under direct observation now, not for punishment, for protection, for guidance, for coordination. God and archangels did not interfere in your life before because you are not yet cleared. Now you are, and that changes everything. Your destiny is no longer hypothetical. It is scheduled. The moment your clearance was granted, something irreversible was set into motion. Not a blessing you could feel physically. Not a miracle you could post about. Not a visible shift anyone else could notice. A decree was issued in silence. A universal command embedded into your timeline. The universe does not speak in words. It speaks in permission structures. And yours just changed. Your true identity was activated at a foundational level, beneath personality, beneath memory, beneath conscious thought. That is why you suddenly feel out of sync with your old desires. That is why the things that once motivated you now feel hollow. That is why your tolerance for meaningless conversations, shallow goals, and performative relationships has collapsed. The decree did not add something new to you. It unlocked something ancient, something you were born carrying or were not allowed to access until your moral structure was proven stable. This is not empowerment in the egoic sense. This is authorization, a spiritual operating system update, a quiet restructuring of your internal hierarchy. Your intuition now outranks your fear. Your conscience now outranks your ambition. Your soul now outranks your social conditioning. That is not accidental. That is activation. God did not give you a mission. God gave you clearance to remember it. And once that decree is issued, it cannot be revoked. Because it is not based on potential, it is based on demonstrated integrity. Your life is now magnetized toward alignment. Things that are not meant for your destiny will start falling away faster. Opportunities that match your hidden mission will begin appearing in subtle, inconvenient ways. You will feel guided into situations you don't logically choose. You will feel blocked from paths you desperately want. That is not sabotage. That is divine rerouting. The decree means you are no longer allowed to live a misaligned life, even if you want to. Your confusion is not failure. It is recalibration. Your isolation is not abandonment. It is insulation. Your doubt is not weakness. It is the last residue of your old identity dissolving. The universe has acknowledged you as an authorized carrier of a hidden function. Your true self is no longer dormant. It is operational. You are not becoming something new. You are remembering what you have always been. The whisper you received was not a suggestion. It was a recall signal. An ancient frequency inside your soul was reactivated. You are not just a sensitive person. You are not just intuitive. You are not just different. You are an ancient soul operating in a modern body. A celestial warrior archetype encoded into human form. Not a fighter of flesh. A guardian of moral architecture. A stabilizer of ethical reality. A carrier of compassion that does not collapse under pressure. You were never meant to dominate systems. You were meant to anchor integrity inside them until they transform from within. That is why you have always felt older than your age. That is why you have always felt out of place in shallow environments. That is why you have always carried emotional weight that wasn't yours. That is why people trauma dump to you without knowing why. That is why strangers trust you instantly. That is why you feel responsible for things you didn't cause. You are a chosen one, but not in the theatrical sense. In the functional sense. In the infrastructural sense. In the timeline-altering sense. Your soul has done this before. In other eras. In other civilizations. In other collapses. You are a reincarnated stabilizer consciousness. A consciousness deployed into chaotic periods to prevent ethical extinction. That is why your life has felt like constant resistance. Because your presence disrupts entropy. Darkness doesn't hate you emotionally. It resists you structurally. Because your mere existence weakens corrupt trajectories. You are not here to be famous. You are not here to be wealthy. You are not here to be admired. You are here to be positioned. To be present at critical moments. To be the one person who chooses compassion when everyone else chooses convenience. To be the one person who refuses to cross a moral line when everyone else justifies it. That is what a celestial warrior is. Not someone who destroys enemies. Someone who outlives corruption. Someone who holds a frequency steady until others remember who they are. You are not imagining your calling. You are not delusional. You are not late. You are an ancient soul whose identity has just come back online. Your purpose is not dramatic. It is not heroic in the cinematic sense. It is not something the world will applaud when it first appears. Your mission is quieter, more precise, more dangerous to corruption than any loud revolution could ever be. You were assigned to anchor integrity into environments that are slowly decaying, to be a living reference point for compassion when cruelty becomes normalized, to stabilize moral gravity in spaces where people start justifying harm, lying, exploitation, and indifference. Your presence alone recalibrates rooms. Your reactions alone interrupt toxic cycles. Your refusal to participate in dishonesty collapses entire chains of corruption without anyone realizing you were the trigger. You are here to hold a frequency that others unconsciously attune to. You are here to model restraint in a world addicted to impulse. You are here to model dignity in a world addicted to dominance. You are here to model compassion in a world addicted to cruelty. That is why your calling feels unconventional, because it does not look like a career. It does not look like a ministry. It does not look like a platform. It looks like a way of being, a way of choosing, a way of responding when no one is watching. Your mission unfolds privately before it becomes visible. It operates through conversations you think are insignificant, through moments where you choose not to say the cruel thing that would win you social points, through moments where you choose not to exploit a weakness even though you could, through moments where you choose not to abandon someone when they become inconvenient. Every one of those moments transmits a correction signal into the collective moral field. You are not here to save the world in a grand gesture. You are here to prevent it from collapsing into something inhuman, one choice at a time. That is why your life feels heavy. Because you are carrying ethical weight most people refuse to touch. That is why your calling feels lonely. Because very few people are willing to live at this level of moral responsibility. That is your assignment. To anchor integrity where it is disappearing. To hold compassion where it is being mocked. To stay human in a world slowly forgetting what that means. Once your mission activated, the material layer of your life began quietly reorganizing itself around your alignment. Not through instant wealth, not through sudden fame, not through miraculous lottery-level events, through improbable ease, through subtle doors opening at exactly the moment you are about to give up, through resources appearing when your capacity to continue was almost gone, through people entering your life who stabilize you instead of draining you, through opportunities that match your values instead of forcing you to compromise them. This is not coincidence. This is logistical support. Divine backing does not look like fantasy. It looks like friction disappearing from paths you are meant to walk. It looks like obstacles dissolving before they become crises. It looks like protection you only notice in hindsight. Money begins flowing through channels that don't require you to betray yourself. Work begins aligning with your nervous system instead of burning it out. Living situations shift into places that feel calmer, safer, quieter. Your body begins healing from stress you thought was permanent. Your sleep improves. Your mind clears. Your emotional regulation stabilizes. These are not random improvements. These are provisioning signals. When a soul is cleared for mission-level responsibility, the universe reallocates support structures around it. You are being given what you need to remain uncompromised. That is why toxic opportunities are collapsing. That is why manipulative people are losing access to you. That is why unstable environments are pushing you out. Because your destiny cannot be carried inside chaos anymore. Your life is being simplified, streamlined, stabilized, so your nervous system can hold a higher moral frequency without burning out. That is what blessings actually are. Not indulgences, infrastructure, support, clearance to exist without constant survival stress. The fact that your life is beginning to feel lighter in subtle ways is proof that divine logistics are now backing you. You are being resourced for alignment, not distraction. Your influence is not loud, but it is contagious. People around you are already changing without knowing why. They start questioning behaviors they used to justify. They start feeling uncomfortable with cruelty they once laughed at. They start hesitating before lying, manipulating, or exploiting someone. And they don't realize the shift began when you entered their emotional field. Your frequency disrupts autopilot morality. Your presence interrupts unconscious patterns. Your restraint creates cognitive dissonance in people who are about to choose harm. Your compassion activates buried conscience in people who thought they didn't have one anymore. This is not because you lecture, not because you preach, not because you correct people. It happens because your nervous system holds a different baseline. You move slower. You respond differently. You don't escalate. You don't humiliate. You don't dehumanize. And that destabilizes toxic social dynamics without confrontation. People begin mirroring your behavior unconsciously. They start softening their tone around you. They start being more honest around you. They start acting more human around you. And they don't know why. You are a walking recalibration point. Your life is teaching without teaching. Your silence is instructive. Your boundaries are instructive. Your refusal to participate in cruelty is instructive. Your willingness to remain compassionate without becoming naive is instructive. This is how you awaken others. Not through slogans, not through ideology, through resonance, through modeling, through energetic coherence. Souls recognize you at a level deeper than language. That is why people feel strangely safe telling you their darkest thoughts. That is why strangers open up to you without prompting. That is why people start changing their behavior after spending time with you. Your mission was never to convert people. It was to stabilize them long enough for their conscience to reactivate. And it is already happening, quietly, invisibly, irreversibly. You are not alone in this activation, even though it feels solitary from the inside. What is happening to you is happening to thousands of others across the world at the same time, in different cultures, different countries, different circumstances, without ever meeting each other. Not influencers, not spiritual celebrities, not loud leaders. Ordinary people with extraordinary moral structure. People who have been quietly choosing integrity in invisible ways for years. People who have been enduring isolation, confusion, delay, and misalignment without understanding why their lives felt paused while others moved forward. People who have been receiving subtle whispers, intuitive nudges, strange awakenings, and quiet realizations that don't fit into any existing spiritual framework. You are part of a distributed network of ancient souls being brought online simultaneously. A global stabilization grid. Each of you anchoring a moral frequency into your local environment. Each of you acting as a correction node in corrupted systems. Each of you altering timelines quietly by refusing to become what hurt you. None of you were told about each other. Because this phase requires invisibility. Because coordination happens at a frequency level, not a social one. You will start encountering people who feel instantly familiar. People whose eyes feel older than their faces. People who trigger a sense of recognition without explanation. Those are others like you. Other activated nodes. You will not form cults. You will not form organizations. You will not form movements. You will form moments, intersections, brief alignments that exchange clarity, strength, or protection before diverging again. This is not a hierarchy. This is a mesh network, decentralized, untraceable, uncorruptible. And it is activating now because the moral architecture of the world is destabilizing. You are not chosen randomly. You are deployed strategically into families, workplaces, communities, institutions, and social systems that are reaching ethical failure points. And you are all coming online quietly at the same time. That is not coincidence. That is a coordinated response to a global moral crisis. And you are one of the anchors holding the line. This is not a message you accidentally found. You were guided to it at the exact moment your soul was ready to receive confirmation instead of confusion. If something inside you feels seen, pressured, emotional, or strangely calm right now, that is not entertainment. That is resonance. That is your higher self recognizing its own activation. And this is where your consent matters. Destiny does not override free will. It waits for agreement. If you are ready to consciously align with the quiet mission unfolding inside you, you have to signal it. Write 777 in the comments, not for superstition, for declaration, for alignment, for consent. Because when you claim your calling, divine logistics accelerate. When you stay silent, destiny slows to protect your nervous system. Share this message with someone who feels different, isolated, morally exhausted, or quietly awakened, even if they never talk about it. You might be the one who triggers their confirmation. You might be the one who stabilizes their awakening. Subscribe not for content, but for synchronization. Because more transmissions like this are coming, and you are part of the audience they are calibrated for. Stay until the end of every message meant for chosen ones, because each one unlocks another layer of your clarity. You are not here to consume inspiration. You are here to receive instructions encoded as reminders. Your life is no longer random. Your confusion is no longer meaningless. Your isolation is no longer abandonment. Everything you have endured is now being repurposed into precision. The whisper you received was not the peak. It was the initiation. Your destiny does not require perfection. It requires consistency. It requires humility. It requires trust. And it requires your conscious participation. You are not waiting to be chosen anymore. You have already been chosen. Now you are choosing whether to step fully into it.